For players out there who like to collect reserve list cards, the market right now is at a tremendous low point, allowing players the opportunity, and I do mean opportunity, to get cards on the reserve list they've always wanted to have. And after the highs we had back in 2020 to 2021, even a little bit into 2022, some of these cards have never been lower. They are hitting rock bottom prices. So in today's video, we are going to discuss some of these cards, where we think the market is going to be headed in the next 12 to 24 months, and what players should know about some of these cards. When you're talking about the reserve list, it seems to most people to be an unobtainable thing. Something only heard about in fairy tales and myth because the cards are so expensive. But we all know that's a lie. It's not expensive. Some of these cards have never been cheaper. And yeah, there are expensive cards on the list, but those cards are seldom used. They are more owned by collectors and investors, people who plan on holding them long term. For a lot of the reserve list cards that players want to play with, they've never been cheaper. Welcome back, everyone. MTG Moxman here. Thanks again for hanging out with me on the channel for a reserve list topic day. Now, when I'm talking about the reserve list, guys, there are 572 cards. Now, out of all those cards on the list, most players will agree they're not really playable. The majority of these cards are basically worthless unless you find some janky fun deck to make them go off on. And I am a particular advocate of that. I'm not saying everyone else is, but when I talk about cards and I look at a $2 card or a $1 card, I can get just as excited as looking at a $10,000 card because I played in those days. I played in the early days of Magic. I've been here since the beginning, and I'm going to be here probably till the end of my days. I can't help it. I love the game. But when I look at those old cards that most players consider worthless, I try to find ways to utilize them. But that's not what we're talking about. As much as I want to talk about low-end reserve list cards, they'll only be a brief piece of the discussion today. Now, prices right now have continued to fall. Ever since 30th anniversary, we know how it's been going. We've heard this track before, and it's on constant repeat, that it's just going down, down, and eventually Wizards of the Coast is going to reprint the reserve list. Everyone fear the mighty reprint. It's not going to happen. In my brain, there is no reason for it to happen, so I'm going to always advocate for the fact that it's not going to happen in my eyes. If it does, great. You can say I'm wrong. You can prove me wrong later. But let's just deal with the fact of where the cards are. Not our belief systems of the reserve list, but where the prices are at, because that's what really matters. The prices on a lot of these cards have continued to fall. Okay? That means players who may have hoarded multiple copies, the speculators, a lot of those guys got chased out. We know that. But there are players out there who have a playset of 4, 8 copies, and they are looking for funds, so they are selling into this losing market where the prices continue to flop down each and every month. 20 cents here, 30 cents there. It may not seem like a lot, but over the course of a year, that's $4 or $5 less for a card that may have been $200, dropping to $150, then $140, $130, trying to find that bottom place in the market space for Magic the Gathering. As an unregulated market, there are times that players will corner the market, do buyouts, and control as large of a position of a card as they can get their hands on, because as you know, buying into a market like that, you are just causing cards to get eaten up and the price to actually jump. That's what a buyout does. If you buy out all at once, the price will jump because there's suddenly a vacuum, a lack of cards in the system, and then players who are buying into that, the FOMO kicks in, depending on the card, of course. Like, it can't just be any card, all right? Inevitably, though, the buyout can't be held. So the market reacts and the prices dip back down. We've seen that multiple times now with cards I like Soldevi Excavations. People on this channel, we have bought this card out. We have seen the market reactions and the market manipulation control that we had in that market space. And over time, we witnessed what happened. It went from its all-time high and is just slowly drifting down. And the lack of supply slowly got filled again. A lot slower than I expected, but it did get filled till we have a healthy amount available on places like eBay, Card Kingdom, TCG Player, okay? So those cards got renewed. But when you look at cards as an example, because I know Soldevi Excavations very well, when you look at the print run of Alliances at 180 million cards, that means for any rare in that set, it's between 300 and 330,000 copies that were created at the time of Alliances. Now, look at a sealed box of Alliance. Used to be like $5,000, $6,000, down to less than $3,000. $1,000 for a box of Alliance. That still seems like a lot of money, but it's a lot less than it used to be. That's about $100 a pack, give or take, depending on US versus Canadian prices. But it's really come down in price, and that's because nobody wants it. Nobody cares about it. Nobody's thinking about it from that aspect anymore because of 30th anniversary. But what about the cards in those sets? Look at Urza's Destiny, Urza's Legacy, Urza's Saga. Look at all the amount of rares. Start targeting the really good rares in that set that actually get played. Look at Replenish. That card used to be like $200 US. Now it's like $60. Replenish brings back all enchantments from a graveyard to play. That wasn't a big deal in 1999. That wasn't a big thing. But in 2023, for 1 white generic and 3 colorless, bringing back every enchantment in your graveyard in an enchantment deck, that card is phenomenally powerful and it costs less than Shieldred. Why is that card not being bought? Why have people not noticed it? Well, it is being bought. It's just being bought steady. It's not a buyout, it's just being bought steady. For the players who ignored this card and said, it's worthless, it's too expensive, I can never afford it, it's $60. That's for near mint, by the way. If you can find a heavily played copy, you're paying $30. $30 US. That's not even the cost of a pre-release kit. So don't tell me these cards aren't affordable. Now when you look at other cards, Yavimaya Hollow was on my top 10 last week. That card regenerates creatures. A mechanic that a lot of Wizards employees don't like anymore. It's kind of hard to utilize, which is why they don't print regenerate creatures anymore. They prefer the shield tokens and stuff. But let's face it, regeneration is still there. It's still playable. And in a casual format like Commander, it's still going to show up. So why does that card only command $40-something? When you compare it to anything that's being printed nowadays and the way Wizards of the Coast prints their new cards and gives these chase cards, there are tokens. As people showed on my Discord, there are tokens out there that cost almost as much as some of the cards I'm mentioning in the video right now. That's insane. Now when you look at, again, let's take a look at Replenish. There was a card printed in Strixhaven, which I like to pair with it, and that is the Bibuloplex. That was a card I thought had a lot of value going forward in the game, but it never went anywhere, and that's what happens. Reserveless cards that are actually played, combination cards can be rooted together. Mind over matter. There's cards like Soldevi Digger mixed in with River Song from Doctor Who. There are combination cards that go, and they get a surge in sales. They go up. It's like, whoa, look at it, it's climbing. It hits a peak, players forget about it, move on to the next shiny thing, and the price goes down. When that price goes down, that's when players tend to buy who are smarter than the average bear. Those are the players who say, oh, this card's back down to $2. Well, it's going to get noticed again at some point. Some other card's going to connect with it 2 years from now, 3 years from now. I might as well buy 10 copies. It's $50 for Soldevi Excavation. If I get 10 copies right now, I can just hold on to it and then sell into that market. That's what happens. And that's what really ticks off those players, the minority, those minority voices that say, the prices are too high. Because you didn't buy it when it was low because you weren't paying attention. That's your fault, not the player out there who speculated and decided to corner the market when the price dropped. That's the way the game is played. Winners come out on top. As sad as that is, the people who pay attention, the people who actually pay attention every day are the ones who come out on top and win in the game of the speculation game for Magic. When you look at the reserveless cards like Academy Rector, remember that thing being like $200? Go search in your library for any single enchantment card and put it into play. Think about the amount of cards nowadays that, in comparison to what there were in the 90s. Cards like that become highly sought after and powerful. But when they reach that high point, players say it's too expensive, they scratch it off their list as too expensive, and they forget the card exists. To them, it's blocked out. And then when the card drops down, it gets mentioned in a video or a comment or some new combo comes along, and people say, oh, it's only $60, it's only $40, it's $30. But then there's a big surge of FOMO, people buy the card and it's gone. And then it's back up to $80, $90. Those players get mad and say, oh, it's too expensive, man, I can't buy it. I've seen that multiple times in comments in the comment section, oh, that card's too pricey. But it wasn't before I did the video, because I was paying attention to the market. And yes, people on my Discord, people on my Patreon get a heads up over other people. Sure, why not? They're supporters of the channel. And if you watch my videos every day, you would find that stuff out. You will see some of the things I talk about inside this market space. And it is a market. It doesn't matter if you like that it's a market. It is a market space that has buyers and sellers trying to meet at an equilibrium of price. The problem is it can be manipulated. It can be controlled by those players who manage to group their money and grab hundreds of copies of cards. We've seen cornering the market before. They can never control everything. Remember, even Soldevi Excavations, 300,000 plus copies. Let's just say only 10% survived. Still 30,000 copies. It's a lot of copies out there to try to control. It's a lot. So with any of these cards, it's just making sure they come back into the market space. So if somebody drains the market and buys all the cards out, and they say, I'm going to buy all the copies of Soldevi Digger at that moment. Well, then players say, oh my God, Soldevi Digger is now a $40 card. All right, I'm going to find I think I have a couple of copies. And they sell it, and they sell into that upswing. And then they wait for it to drop, because that's what happens. Remember Mind Over Matter hitting like $90 last year? Well, right now it's $40. And they're selling 1 or 2 copies, 3 copies every few days. It's not enough to make a top 10 list, but it sells 10 copies a week. So that's $400 a week in sales, nothing huge. But if somebody comes along and says, wow, that's a pretty good price now, and they buy 20 copies, now there's nothing left in the market space, because it's a card that isn't being flushed into the market. It just gets dripped in. And if it gets dripped in and people are dripping it out and buying and selling at an equal pace, nothing ever happens. MTG stocks, other channels, nobody notices it. But these reserve list cards are really cheap right now. If you look at any of the cards in the Urza's block, you start looking at all the other amazing cards in other sets that you've always wanted to have that are not the top tier. I'm not talking the Moxen, the Black Lotus. I'm not talking about Time Twister, Time Walk. Yes, they are the iconic cards, and I'm glad I own a couple of play sets. I'm glad I have them. They're amazing. But those aren't the average cards being played at Commander. Those are not the average cards being played by the majority of players. But there are those reserve list cards that do get played. And those are the cards you should be looking at. Those are the cards you should be buying into, because the future of those cards is a lot brighter than the collector's ring. The collector ring is always going to have a certain prestige and value to it, okay? I always think Time Walks by Amy Weber is going to be amazing. And I always think that all the cards like Time Twister and the Moxes and, of course, Black Lotus, they're always going to have a certain spot, a spotlight shined on them as the best cards in the game. The Power 10, things like Force Field and Time Vault, as well as cards like Library of Alexandria, those cards as well will always contain a massive appeal. But those are the cards that get played every day. And the reserve list cards that do get played every day inside these decks, those are the cards players need to pay attention to, because even a card like Replenish, which has around 330,000 copies made, it has a similar print run to Alliances, although the packs are a different size, but the overall rares are roughly the same. So when you look at those kind of sets, and you see how often those cards get dumped in, there will be a finite amount that eventually will put pressure on the market at some point down the road. Maybe not now, but at some point. Again, going with the whole vein that they're never reprinting the reserve list again. They're not even going to try. This 30th anniversary stuff, it's probably never going to happen again. They learned their lesson, at least for the next couple of years. So it's at least a few years apiece. But with the creation of all these new card concepts and ideas from Wizards, with all these new enchantments and enchantment creatures, and all these new hybrid type monsters, Dinosaur, Minotaur, Kobold, Thrall, that could be a creature type at some point, which means Didgeridoo and all these other things become more valuable because of it. So when is it your advantage to buy? When the card's at 40, 60, 80, $100, or when it's $5 right now for a Didgeridoo and you go and buy it? Those are the points you need to look at for reserve list collecting and speculating. If it's a card you want, this is your time to buy. It really is. You have a few bucks, you got a few bucks in your side drawer right there, and you go, how much can $10 get me? Go take a look. You don't know until you take a gander at some of the amazing cards that have never been cheaper. And then you look at the expensive cards again, and you get turned off. Don't look at those cards. Look at the ones you actually want to play with. Focus on the cards that are cards you are going to use inside your decks, and those are the ones I think that players will be buying into the future. Those are the cards that are going to have value. Cards like the Metalworker, cards like all the dual lands, Wheel of Fortune, cards that will continuously see play by players who want to get their hands on them. Yes, prices will fluctuate. They will always go up and down. The market is not a guaranteed organism to always give you returns. But if you're a player who just wants to play the card, that shouldn't matter. If you're a collector and speculator, you know how the game is played. You're going to buy the cards, buy them when they're cheap, and sell them when they get more expensive to help recoup the costs of the ones you bought before to come out ahead. It's the way the game is played. It may not be the fairest game in the world, but this reserve list collecting, speculating, it's not going to stop because you say it shouldn't happen. It's going to keep happening. The sales are going to keep happening. The buying and selling is going to keep happening. And the players who know how to look for the right cards at the right time are going to come out on top as either players or speculator investors. Thanks again, guys, for hanging out. Thanks for being here on the channel. Drop some comments in the comment section. I'll see you guys all tomorrow for another video. Enjoy the day. Hey guys, a big shout out and thank you to the fantastic patrons I have here on the channel supporting each and every day. For all those amazing people out there tuning into the channel, thanks again for being here. Patrons, you rock. YouTube membership members, thanks again everyone. Welcome back to the Ramble Jamble. This is a full cup of coffee. We got time. The adrenaline is going. I am perfectly tuned in with a coffee kick right now. So welcome back. You've made it to the end. We're going to talk for a minute. Yesterday, long story short, somebody paid me back some money they owed me. It was only a couple $100. Do you know what I did with that couple $100? You would think, oh, you put it into your TFSA's, Mox, man. I'd already accounted for that, and I decided to spend this money. I just bought extra Soldevia excavations. I figured I haven't bought like a little chunk in a while, so I spent all of it. Some of those Soldevia excavations were $10. But what I did was I bought near mint ones, light played ones, moderately played ones from some local stores, from TCG Player, using my own affiliate link, and other platforms. I can't wait for those cards to come in because I'm going to do a little comparison to see how those cards look nowadays, because they say they're near mint, and I'm going to compare it against actual near mint cards that I've already collected over the years, all the way back to 2013. I want to see the difference now. I mark my cards up very carefully when I get them. And yes, jeweler loop, the whole thing, because I want to see any discrepancies in how the stores are grading. I've always found it fascinating. But really, with the way the reserve list prices are right now, I can't believe people aren't taking advantage of it. I looked and put one Replenish, one Academy Erector, one Acid Rain, cards I've always wanted to have extras of, right? For other commander decks, so I didn't have to tear things apart. And it basically came to less than $300 US to get like these 6 cards I wanted, okay? Plus I put a few River Song and a few Soldevi Diggers, just so I could say, okay, I looked at these cards. Now I didn't purchase them, but I did add them up to see what it would look like. And then I looked at several, and okay, I've done this, you guys probably don't know that. I keep like records of all kinds of things where I don't buy, but I window shop. So I looked at a similar order I'd done in 2022, when those cards would have cost me $840 roughly, although it was a couple extra smaller cards. But either way, I took those cards out and it averaged out to a savings of around $500 for the same amount of cards. $500 less in less than a 2-year span. So if you're looking for a deal, you just had it. That was the deal. If I'd bought all those cards and looked at them and bought them. If you look at Metalworker, if you look at Argivian Archaeologist and all these cards, look at City of Shadows. Card used to be $200+, and now you can get near mint copies for $60. Heavily played for $32. That's insanity to me. That is just crazy to think. And when all these people whine and complain that they can't afford the cards, when it's a $30 card, it's the price of 2 Big Mac meals. Don't tell me you can't afford that. If you're playing Magic and you're indulging and buying commander deck, things to build with your commander deck, and buy a full sealed commander deck box for $60, then you can afford those cards. You're just humming and hawing that's not cheap enough when it really is. It's insanity to me. And if I had millions of dollars, actually I'd probably invest that. But with the profits from those millions of dollars, yes, I'd probably be buying more cards more often. It's just crazy to me to see where people complain and where people visually see it's to them too expensive. But in my head I'm going, do you know where these cards have been and where they're at right now? Do you know where they could go in the future? Pay attention. Anyway, back to my coffee. Guys, have a great day. I hope you enjoy the bonus video. I just felt like sharing, and sharing is caring.